There is a lot to like about this Prado. Kind of reminds me of an old Range Rover Classic in a way. Oh, whoa! That's a big lift off there. What makes this Prado Altitude special? Well, I'm out in the bush for the day in this Prado with all of my mates. So let us explain it to you together. There's a lot to talk about with this Toyota LandCruiser Prado Altitude. Firstly, we've got all-terrain tires here on 18-inch wheels. That's really good to see. Plus, we've got a locking center and rear differential. One really cool thing is definitely this front sway bar disconnect function here. Really keen to see how that goes off-road. Old faithful under the bonnet though, that 2.8 litre engine. But is this really going to make me jump for joy, do you think?
Oh, what a feeling, Toyota.
The 2025 Toyota LandCruiser Prado is priced from $72,500 plus on-road costs. But we have the off-road hero of the range, which is the Altitude, and we've got a much higher asking price here of $92,700 plus on roads. But of course, we do have a bunch of extra accessories fitted to this test car. So along with all of that off-road bolt-on good stuff, we've also got a brake controller and some floor mats, which makes the asking price over 100 grand. You're looking at $107,416.51 plus on-road costs. If you are chasing down a LandCruiser Prado or maybe another family four-wheel drive for yourself, or for that matter, anything with four wheels, then check out what's available at Drive Marketplace. Now this tester does have a genuine Toyota bull bar fitted. It's color-coded and it's not cheap. We've also got a winch fitted here. This is a winch-compatible bull bar, but although it is expensive, I do like the attention to detail. It looks quite quality, and I also like the amount of underbody protection here, plus 2 rated recovery points. Altitude is the only model that gets a locking rear differential in the Prado range. Everyone else has a locking center diff because don't forget this is a proper full-time four-wheel drive. Now that's a good thing, but I also like the front sway bar disconnect in this Altitude model. Really keen to see how it goes off-road. But of course, a big deal are these tires here. They're a Toyo all-terrain. They're on an 18-inch alloy wheel. They're a much, much better option for people who want to go off-road straight off the bat. Now, what is more familiar in this Prado is the engine. We've got a carryover 2.8 litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine here. Outputs are the same, as you can see, and it is still outpunched by a Ford Everest V6. But what's different with this model is that we do now have 48-volt active technology here, which is a kind of mild hybrid system for this engine. Now, is it going to actually make any difference to the driving experience or the fuel economy? Stay tuned to find out. If you're watching on YouTube, please stop, take the time to give us a thumbs up, because we actually want to come out here, and if we get enough thumbs up, maybe the bosses will let me bring the swag out and we can spend a night camping out here. It'll be awesome, and we'll do it on a video. Thank you. On the inside of the LandCruiser Prado Altitude, you do have a high level of standard equipment. This includes things like a heated steering wheel, 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, and carpeted floor mats. There's leather accented seats that are heated and ventilated, and they come with electric adjustment and memory. There's also a dual zone climate control system, 360-degree camera, but this model does miss out on tire pressure monitoring, which is strange considering the off-road focus of the Altitude. The center console is refrigerated, however, in this model, and there is an upgraded 14-speaker JBL sound system. Now you've got all the bells and whistles in this Prado Altitude, but once you're sitting in the vehicle, there are things that I do really like about this car. One thing, the seats. I mean, I like the base cloth seats with manual adjustment in the cheapest Prado spec, but this vehicle, you get the upgraded seats, obviously, and they are quite comfortable as well. I really like the seating position of this car. It feels really natural and ergonomic, comfortable for drive for long distances. And one thing that you'll notice when driving this car is it kind of reminds me of an old Range Rover Classic in a way, in terms of the seating position and visibility here. You've got lots of glass out the sides. You've got very vertical glass as well for great visibility looking forward and out to the side. It just feels like a nice car to drive in that respect, and ergonomically, it's really good as well. Now, one thing that does work from a practicality point of view, I think, is just the switchgear and how it's laid out and how it falls to hand quite naturally. Regular old gear shifter here. You've got your driving mode buttons all down here. So mode select, your diff locks, and electronic park brake these days as well. And then moving up here, you've got your climate control buttons. I've got to say these piano style buttons here probably feel slightly flimsy compared to what you get in an Isuzu MUX, which is a much, much cheaper vehicle, they probably feel a little bit nicer to me, but maybe I'm being a little bit too picky there. Good infotainment display up here, a bit higher, that does work well. And one thing to note here actually, you've got a cooled center console, which is a really cool feature, excuse the pun. You can turn that on. That will actually get quite cold for drinks and sandwiches and whatnot, but that is now a much smaller space for storing stuff in comparison to a non-cooled one. So it's it's cool, it's nice to have, but it is a bit of a backward step in some respects as well if you don't actually want that to be cold all the time. But in terms of other practicalities here, we've got 2 cup holders, we've got a wireless charging pad, 3 USB power outlets, that is pretty good, and an HDMI. I'm not sure what you'd be using that for, to be honest with you. And one of my favorites is a volume dial. So this vehicle, for the price, I mean, it's not a cheap car overall, and some of the materials, they feel pretty good. Some of them maybe not so much for the price, but I do love the way it feels to sit in and just the layout of the buttons. I think that is the main attraction of this LandCruiser Prado. Here's the second row of the Prado, and I think there are things that I really like about the second row in here and things that maybe are a little bit behind par as well. Let's start with the good things first. And one thing I mentioned up front there was the amount of space and visibility that you get just visually, I think, which makes a big difference for passengers in the back here. We've got massive windows here. I can see forward quite well. I can look out to the side. And for someone on a road trip with kids in the back, I think kids are just much happier when they can see the outside world a little bit more. They can interact a bit more, and they're just happier people. So that does work well. Now we've got a third zone of climate here with a separate set of controls as well in the back, so people can do that. You've got air vents up in the roof, so that circulates air quite well. And you'll notice as well, because other Prado specifications have a third row of seats, we've even got some air vents in the back here for your cargo, which maybe is a bit redundant, but I don't know, if you're carrying dogs in the back or something like that, you might really appreciate that feature, something you don't get everywhere else. So as usual, that's my driving position up front there. I'm around 1.8 meters tall, a little bit under 6 foot, around that mark somewhere, and I've got a little bit of leftover space here, but not a lot. And it's worth noting that I personally sit relatively close to the steering wheel in front. So if you've got a larger human up front that sits further away, this leg room will dissipate reasonably quickly, I think. And there's not a lot of toe room. And you notice that the seat footwell sort of juts forward a little bit, so you can't tuck your feet back all the way. My thighs are kind of off the seat base a little bit. And if you wanted to use this as a 5-seater all the time, it's not a 7-seater, obviously, you do have a bit of a transmission tunnel here to contend with this big sort of plastic thing. So if I just slide across here, I can either spread my legs out really rudely and be somewhat comfortable, and these guys have no room, or I've got to tuck my feet up like this somehow, and well, there's no leg room at all, and I'm probably not going to be comfortable for the long drive. So it's a bit of a shame to say that this Prado, even though it's such a large 4-wheel drive and a good family vehicle, it's really good as a 4-seater, but as a 5-seater, it sort of has a few issues, I think, which is a problem. So a lot of people have been complaining about the boot of the Prado, and for good reason, mostly in the 7-seat vehicles. And this one, the Altitude, is a 5-seater, so you're kind of getting the better experience in a way, even though you've only got room for 5 on board. And the reason why actually is because this boot is lifted up in terms of height. You can see we've got this nice rubber floor here, and underneath that's your regular floor. But as you can see, from the bottom of the tailgate up to here, there's a fair bit of boot actually missing, and that's because we've got a 48-volt mild hybrid powertrain in this new Prado. So you've got a battery that's wedged in under the floor here, and they've raised the floor up in order to accommodate it. Now for 7-seaters, that's a bad thing, because now that third row sort of sits proud and high in the back here. You've got a lot less boot space going on, and it's just a real compromise. It's less compromised here in this case, but still you can see the reason why. And I do have an issue with it, because you've got this compromise in terms of boot space here, but you don't really get much of a trade-off in terms of the improved driving experience, improved outputs or anything like that from this 48-volt mild hybrid system. This car doesn't drive like a Toyota hybrid would. There's no real assistance in terms of driving. You might get a bit of extra stop-start in traffic and that sort of thing, so a bit of extra fuel economy maybe, but the trade-off does feel a little bit underdone for my experience. I mean, you got to say though, when you've got this all set up like this. The boot is pretty big overall. It's got enough room for all your gear. You go camping and do that sort of thing. That's all good, but it just leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth, I think, to know that you've got this clear and obvious compromise in the packaging of the Prado. There's no more rear-mounted spare wheel on the back available for the new Prado, which means fuel capacity isn't as big as what used to be possible once upon a time. But still, you've got 110 litres of capacity, which is more than a Ford Everest. And now you've got a handy rear opening window hatch at the back, along with a powered tailgate. Now with 150 kilowatts and 500 Newton meters, this 4-cylinder diesel, it does a decent job, but it also feels maybe a little bit of a letdown in comparison to what you get in the Ford Everest with that 600 Newton meter V6. The Ford is of course at a lower price as well. It's worth pointing out that the 48 volt system in this new Prado does practically nothing from a user experience point of view. It's there to improve efficiency and also lower emissions. In terms of actually giving this car some additional propulsion or anything like that, it really doesn't bring anything to the table in that regard. And you know, this engine, it's fine enough, it's quiet enough, it's not particularly smooth, nor is it particularly noisy. It does a decent enough job, but I think it does just sit behind the Ford noticeably in terms of having that sort of effortless, torquey feeling that you get from the 3-litre V6 over there. So while you could argue that the engine is perhaps a little bit underdone, I think the driving experience is excellent otherwise. You've got a really good 8-speed automatic transmission here. You've got an old-fashioned full-time 4-wheel drive system with a locking center differential. That is different to the Ford that uses clutches, by the way. And you've got a steering and suspension tune and all of those bits that just come together to make a really nice driving experience. It's got that nice balance between ride comfort, but feeling sort of firmly in control on the road as well. It's good on bumpy roads. It's pretty good on fast dirt as well. I really don't have many complaints about the way this car portrays itself on most situations, except for the fact that the engine, you know, this thing would be a lot better, I think, with a V6 diesel with an extra 100, 150 Newton meters available. But I think we've been saying that about the Prado forever, so it's kind of the same thing carrying on there. So if you can look past the engine, which is arguably a little underdone, I think this is quite an excellent driving experience, especially if you want to do those long road trips along rough and unsealed roads. Do you like videos where drones get attacked by eagles? Well, we like making them, and we'd like you to help us by making sure you're subscribed to Drive on YouTube so you don't miss out on future videos. The Prado has historically been a really good off-road option for the last, 3 or 4 decades in Australia, and that continues to be the case here. This new generation Prado, it's quite different in a few ways. This now has a platform that is similar to what you get in a LandCruiser 300 series, similar wheelbase even, but you do get the same carryover 2.8 litre turbo diesel engine. Now we've got an 8-speed automatic, which is a bit different for this Prado. We've also got that 48 volt V-active system that Toyota like to call it. Not that it really does much to change the driving experience, but off-road, there is a lot to like about this Prado, and some parts of it are kind of hard to explain, but it's just the calibration of things like the steering, the brakes, the throttle, the transmission. It doesn't throw any curveballs at you when you're driving this vehicle off-road. It feels really nicely dialed. And when you're cruising along sort of rougher dirt roads like this one, higher speed dirt, there's just a nice sense of stability and smoothness and control, I think, that you get from this car, which means if you want to do long Ks off-road, it's really, really well dialed. And in my opinion, this is one area where the Prado has a distinct advantage over the Ford Everest off-road. The Everest is good off-road, but I think this is definitely better. But for those who want the best off-road Prado, this Altitude is the choice. Yes, it's expensive, but it does have a bit of extra gear to help justify its position in terms of being on that trim walk. Now this is the only Prado in the range to get a locking rear differential, along with the full gamut of off-road driving technology like multi-terrain monitor and a front sway bar disconnect, Now it's worth pointing out that this is different to the KDSS system that we used to get in the old Prado, but it allows for a similar effect for drivers in the real world. It loosens up that front end off-road for more stability and a bit of suspension flex. Alright, so let's see how all of that hardware actually works in the real world. Does it make a difference? Got a fairly steep and rutted climb here. There's going to be a couple of pinching points to get up. I've got my sway bar disconnect engaged on the front. I've got my center diff locked. I've left the rear diff unlocked for now just to see what happens. And I've put that multi-terrain select button into rock mode as well. So let's just see how we go. I'm going to ease up here, probably get a little bit cross-axled at times. Hopefully not run out of clearance as well. Up we go. These tyres seem to be gripping quite well on the dirt there, not slipping at all. Ease up to this here. I'm definitely going to be cross-axled here. Searching for a bit of traction there, but it's working. Climb upwards. Oh, it's pretty steep. Hey. It's done it. Quite steep there, actually. There's that one crossover point where it was struggling for a second for traction, but not for long. I just kept a steady throttle. There was no rear diff lock, by the way, and it did it more than happy. That's actually pretty good. That front sway bar disconnect just seems to give a noticeable amount of extra suppleness in the front there and gets an edge of stability that you don't often get with independent front suspension vehicles. It definitely does make a difference, I think. Is it like a Wrangler Rubicon? No. But I think it's better than, it is worthwhile being there, I should say. It does actually bring something to the party. It's not just a gimmick. Now, what goes up must come down. Now, I can put this thing in DAC crawl mode, which is downhill assist control. And you can actually control the speed via the dial there, which is really cool. And the lowest speed is actually super low, so you can drive through it just to accelerate where you need to. You can turn on these very good 360 cameras actually, just to help you see where you're going. It's quite a useful feature actually. But now let's see how we go down here. It's beautifully slow. That is like really slow, nice and controlled as well. I actually have to turn it up even though this is quite a steep hill here. As I come down and try and get this car positioned correctly down the hill. All right, let's turn that down to the lowest speed again. So my feet are completely off the pedals at the moment, which is always a bit disconcerting. I might just let one foot wave over the brake just in case, but this is doing quite well. All right, I'm on the brakes here now. Probably more just because I feel like I need the control myself, but ease down. You can see in the camera, this is quite a steep little angle here actually. Hopefully I'm not going to touch down on that bull bar on the front. That's what it's there for, but it's also very shiny and nice, so I don't want to damage it myself. Back in reverse, there you go, look at that. I can maybe across this way a little bit more. Parking sensors going off. There we are. Steering is a bit stiff there actually. Oh, whoa! That's a big lift off there. Got a little bit more than I bargained for there. There we go, that's the tow bar, or maybe the tailpipe actually, dragging off the ground there. Wowee. There we go, we got there in the end. Probably a little bit harder than we needed to, just because I was trying to preserve that front bumper. I've got a big old wheel lift at the back. Anyway, got it done. Well, it is a bit expensive. It does seem a bit underpowered in comparison to that Ford Everest V6, and the interior is a letdown in terms of the amount of space and practicality you get from what is going to be a family four-wheel drive. But I've got to say, I still like a lot of things about this LandCruiser Prado, and it comes down to things that you can't necessarily put your finger on that easily. It's the calibration of the chassis, the suspension, the steering. The way this car drives on-road and off-road is quite pleasurable. I could spend bulk hours behind the wheel here and be quite happy. And of course, in altitude spec, this thing is really good off-road. It is an absolute improvement over the base GX, and it is one of the better off-roaders you can get in standard form. But it does come at a fairly hefty price there. So are you better off buying a GX and spending that money on aftermarket gear, or are you better off with something else like the Ford Everest, for example, that offers better value for money? For those people who want a Prado, they like the idea of it and they can afford it, this is a really, really nice vehicle. But I'd suggest that everyone should do their cross shopping before they sign the dotted line. Why do I keep going on about the Ford Everest? In a word, because it is a fantastic option. You can see more about this vehicle here, which is our two-time Drive Car of the Year winner in that category. But as always, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to Drive on YouTube, and I'll see you on the next one.